No.
All right, we are live. Erica, why don't
Hi.
you start us out?
No, it's awesome to be back. It's nice to continue the conversation that we were having last week. I think it's really, really important. And so we're unfortunately missing Jeannie this time, but we're here and we're willing to discuss. We wanted to focus on how the coronavirus is impacting the Black community, because I don't feel like, or we don't feel like it's being talked about enough, and it's having major impact. So I think Ronald wants to start off with the story, right, Ronald?
Yes, and I'm thinking this story may touch to a lot of people because some people may have felt this story, some people may not yet. We don't know. Okay, so the last time we guys talked, I know we were talking about how I was out of work due to the coronavirus. Okay, so Monday, I get a letter from the corporate office from my job down in Texas. And it's not the best news in the whole wide world. I got the letter saying that I've been fired from my job.
What?
Are you serious?
I've been fired from my job as of April 17th of 2020.
As of a month ago.
Oh yeah. And like I said, I'm just now getting that letter this week. So Monday actually. So I'm like,
As of a month ago.
oh yeah. So I'm like, wow, like what in the world? Like nobody wanted to send a letter or anything.
Have you gotten paid?
Huh?
Have you gotten paid? Like,
I've been pretty much been filing not Social Security, but not disability, unemployment for the past couple of weeks. And again, most of the people that are in my position, that's what they have to do. However, because of what my company did in between time, is almost like me fighting unemployment to make sure that my basic needs are still being met. And so, again, I just filed for unemployment. Let's see, this is Thursday, Tuesday, filed for unemployment. And so now I'm actually waiting to see, because now I actually have the official paperwork or documents showing I have been fired. Now I'm waiting on the state of Michigan to figure out what they're going to do. What more information do I need to give them to solidify that I'm fired? And if my company is going to do anything to show them that I'm fired as well, on top of the fact that my supervisor asked my wife to write the company a letter stating why I should stay at home, why she's an essential employee, how come she can't take time off of her job to watch the kids, and if we were willing to have an outside company that we have no idea who it is to watch our 3 kids, and state the fact of why we were opposed to that. So here we are, in May, and I know in Michigan dealing with the coronavirus, it's not good. It's not good at all. And I'm pretty sure anybody that's watching this broadcast or anybody that's listening in, they can count on their fingers how many stories they have heard like mine, where 1 minute, working, next minute, they're filing for disability, next minute, fired. Now they're completely out of a job. So it's like, what in the world? What do we do? Especially in the Black community, where a lot of people, they are dependent upon that job as a source of income during these times. But at the same time, when you lose your job and you try to reach out to the government agencies for help, and for whatever reason, there's a bunch of red tape that keeps them from actually helping you the way that you need to help, then what?
It's funny that you say that, because I read a statistic. I even wrote it down because I found it to be really interesting, and it kind of links to what happened to you. And it says, as of May 11th, 17,155 Black African Americans have died due to COVID-19, but they're also saying that in Chicago, I'm sorry, it was saying, hold on, let me find it. Oh, the employment. So then it went down to, it went just into unemployment, that 16.7% of African Americans are now unemployed, and the chances are they are not going to get their jobs back.
Agreed.
So, and then it's kind of like a domino effect, because then that trickles down into, you know, being able to pay your bills, and then the increase in poverty, and then it goes into education and all these different things, because public schools are funded based on the area in which they live. So what happened to you is happening to African Americans all across our country. And I think it kind of underscores why we need universal basic income at this point. It's almost like a non-negotiable in my mind. Like, I recently got my stimulus check and I was like, wow, like I can, if I didn't have a job, right, I'd be like, this is such a relief. And every person needs to get this every single month, even well beyond this pandemic, because just to kind of bounce back is gonna take a lot of work, right? And so if you look across the country, and not only are people being unemployed, but if we just look at the death rates, it's hitting the African American community in such vast numbers. Like, here's another one. It says in Kansas, if you're African American, you're 7 times more likely to get the coronavirus. It says in Louisiana that 21,000 people have reported that they have the infection. And then Chicago, 52% of the city's confirmed cases, and 72% of them are deaths.
And why do you think that's the case? Why do you think that's, I guess, concentrated in the African American community? I mean, I have some ideas, but just want to input.
That's the best question to ask, Ashley, because what's causing this? Well, they're saying that their higher populations, their the living conditions in which these African Americans live in like low income areas, right? They're like congested. There's like not the same amount of access to seek medical attention, to get tested. There's not enough tests. That's a problem. They said that I wrote it down because I want to make sure that I got it right. That also people that are like of color are working in like essential jobs, so they're more at risk because they're being exposed to it. So, for example, like if you work at a grocery store, you're coming in contact with more and more people, and people of color are not necessarily able to work from home. So that's causing a lot of people of color to be infected and to be impacted by this.
Yeah, I mean, I think health is one of the factors as well, because I mean, poverty and bad health are closely correlated as well. I mean, when you think about it, people in poverty can't afford to, eat the most quality of meals. Yep. And that's why diabetes and high blood pressure and all of that is highly concentrated in our communities. And yeah, like you said, that a lot of people of color can't, or they work in these essential jobs, and they don't have the luxury to just sit at home and take in paid leave, because these jobs, they don't offer paid leave. Mm-hmm. And so, I mean, that has to do like with, the disparities in the, I guess, what is it? The net worth of like, between the Black and other race community. There's just a huge disparity there. And so, yeah, I think health and and also like access to, I guess, medical care. A lot of people, they don't really receive, and I guess that goes for all people, but I know specifically in our community, I mean, most of these jobs, they don't offer healthcare. And so, I mean, going to the hospital is like literally can leave them homeless, because I mean, a medical bill is extremely expensive. If you just take an ambulance ride, that's more than $1,000. I can't imagine going to the hospital for something serious as coronavirus symptoms. And many people in our community have just created this survival instinct. Like we take care of, the essentials, or like what's right in front of our face, such as like housing and bills and all of that. Because I mean, if you don't have that, then you don't have a place to stay, and then you don't have food. And that's what we tend to focus on. And then like, if that's taken care of, then we can go on to like the whole medical situation and all of that. But I mean, the people have kids, and they know that they have to eat and have to live. And so unfortunately, trips to the hospital and the doctor just aren't a priority, especially since they can't afford it.
Yeah. And I think that I think we should walk it back. Let's look at like the average Black household, right? And maybe Ronald, you could be the first to speak on this, but when you think of like your average Black household, what comes to mind?
Well, for the most part, it's broken. It is very much broken, because a lot of Black households, it's a single parent household where it's the mom, usually the main one raising the kids,
But why do you think that's the case?
Huh?
Why do you think that's the case?
I know in the area where I grew up in, let's say Grand Rapids, and I know somebody from Michigan, they're probably familiar with the area of Grand Rapids. We'll take Grand Rapids for a prime example. A lot of times in the city of Grand Rapids, there's not a strong Black male community, meaning that a lot of the fathers, they're not in the homes. A lot of times they're either going to be out in the streets or in the jail cells because of trying to survive and do what they need to do for their kids, or they're not paying their child support, and so again they're getting locked up. So now it's like that strong Black male figure, it's not there. It's gone. Go for it.
Ronald, I'm going to interject only because someone in the chat is saying that the Black community is kind of putting I guess I'm Heidi or Ellers, if you want to bring it up, says, I wish the Black community didn't always advocate the earthquake was bigger under our house. Well, I push back on that because I feel like there's this thing called systemic racism, and Black people didn't get the same starting point. And so there are extreme disadvantages that Black people have than other ethnicities. And I think it is an unwise statement to make. And I think that it kind of underscores why it's important that we educate people on the Black community and our Black history and all these things that we have been confronted with, because if you don't know, you can't be empathetic and you can't understand. And none of us are sitting under here saying that we want a hand-me-out or we are just making excuses. No, what we're saying is that this country during this pandemic has completely exposed the inequalities that are taking place, the has and the has not, who this country is working for. And all we're asking for is equal opportunities. We're asking you guys, we're asking for Black boys not to be murdered for running, right?
Come on.
For running. We're asking for Black people not to be shot when they're complying to the law, when an officer.
Well, I also want to say, I mean, I completely understand, like, everybody is suffering during this time. Like, these are unprecedented times. Like, a lot of people have lost their jobs, people from all races, and I think that should be a way for all of us to come together. But what I want people to, I guess, understand is that, like, I know, like, in the prison system right now, they're pretty much like stacking, all these people together in prison cells. And they're basically crying out saying, like, we need something, like some kind of protective. I saw this video actually of this guy. He was in a cell with someone who had coronavirus. They did nothing. The people, I guess, like the people over the jail facility or prison facility, they're just like leaving people in these prison cells to die. And you have to think about like who is concentrated in these prison cells. You also have to think about, I mean, I
agree with you. And yes, everyone is going through this pandemic, but I'm saying that when the pandemic hit, there are actual facts that back this up, that if you were, no matter your race, if you were already low income or impoverished or on the borderline of poverty, you were unable to really prepare, and you're unable to stay home. Like, you can't afford to stay home and choose to work from home. You don't have those same opportunities. And so I think that is what we're trying to point out. And also too, we have to think about the education aspect too. Like, now we have kids in low income, we addressed this last time, that don't have internet access in rural and poor communities. And that affects all kids, right? So I think that is what we're trying to say. We're not saying that anyone is better than anyone else. We are saying that we're focusing specifically on the Black community and how they were impacted by.
Oh yeah, that's what I was going to finish off with.
The guy in the chat, because I do feel like it's important to let the people in the chat have a voice. And I'm just speaking to him, saying that we're kind of just going like, oh, poor me, and that's not the case.
No, nobody's thinking that. You guys are saying poor me. The people in the chat are being just trolls right now. Like, again, coming from just the perspective of white people, how we view this, like, it definitely hits certain demographics in certain areas like more than others. Like, nobody with, using any logic would say otherwise. So the people in the chat are just being sad little trolls that are saying otherwise. So again, we need to figure this out as people just trying to work together and move forward and try to do the right thing for everyone as a whole. So again, people watching this, if you want to be trolls, then like, you're not contributing at all. And this is a productive discussion, and we don't condone anybody just trying to get attention by saying dumb comments, period.
Yeah, I can respect anyone that has a different point of view, because I think different perspective and point of views they actually elevate conversations, they add value to conversations. But I think we just have to keep the context of this particular conversation. The topic is, how is COVID-19 impacting the Black community? And that is what we are speaking on.
Absolutely.
Agreed. And just to kind of add on to everything else too, it's like, I know that a lot of people, they're saying a lot of things because it hasn't affected them directly in the same manner as countless other African Americans around this nation haven't been affected by it, so they can't speak on it until they actually get hit with it and it gets slapped in their face. Then they're going to be the ones saying, "Oh, woe is me! How come this is happening? How come I got to go through this? How come I got to go through that?" Now they're going to be on the receiving end, and they're going to feel what it feels like to be in not only in my shoes, but countless other people's shoes as well, and have to figure out how in the world I'm going to feed my kids. I don't have a nest egg in my savings account. I don't have the luxury of working from home. I don't have the luxury of being able to use my sick time or vacation time. I'm not able to have the luxury, if I do have the virus, to go to the hospital because I have insurance. I mean, I have the luxury because the job that I work doesn't offer it. So now we're going to be stuck saying, okay, what do I need to do in order for me to get from point A to point B? And the conversation is, again, at hand. It's addressing the issues that, yes, there is a huge inequality right now in the African American community, and it shows. And for you not to recognize that, and for you not to fight for that, it just shows that you're not a team player, that you're selfish. It's all about you and what you want to do for yourself and not for the rest of the community, and it's like, come on now. A lot of African Americans, they don't live in the best neighborhoods. They don't live in the best neighborhoods. Why? Because they probably haven't had the chance to get an actual quality education where the teachers actually gave a crap about their future to push them ahead in life. They may not have a solid core at home to push the fact that, hey, you need to study. You need to study. Before you go outside and do anything, you need to make sure your grades are good before you do anything else.
I think when we talk about COVID and the education aspect, I think it's really important to highlight the achievement gap and how that just completely widened since this has happened. Just because, it was in New York. I want to say it's 100,000 kids didn't even have a computer, and I'm not talking specifically Black kids. I'm just saying kids in low income areas in general. 100,000 kids did not have a computer to be able to transition to distant learning. Then you have kids, if you or families that are low income that did not have high speed internet, middle class. I actually have the number. So low income was 35% did not have high speed internet. If you were middle class, that's 17% that didn't have access to high internet speed. And if you were well off, affluent, you have 6% didn't have high speed internet. So if you took the middle and low income, that is like almost half of our kids that just could not even transition to remote learning. And so that is something that I think is impacting Black communities and communities of color. And also you have the education levels too. Like, if you have an 8th grader, can you do Algebra 1? Can you tutor your kid in Algebra 1? Are you even at home to be able to tutor your kids in Algebra 1? Right? So, because you're the member, like the essential hero. I like to call them heroes personally, but it's like, you can't afford to stay home to sit on Khan Academy and work through that. Right?
Yeah, I'm actually looking at facts now, some numbers. It says only 18% of African American 4th graders were proficient in reading, and only 19% scored as proficient in math. And by comparison, the national average for proficiency among all students in 4th grade reading was 36%, while it was 40% in 4th grade math, 34% in 8th grade reading, and 33% in 8th grade math.
And so if you look at like summertime, where most kids, unless they are participating in enrichment activities like summer camp, travel, things of that nature, what's happening is that it already sets you back a little bit. So now they've been out of school since, I want to say, March. Every school obviously kind of closed their school at different times, but let's just say the ballpark is March. So they will really have been out of school from March all the way until school reopens. And some schools open up in August and some will open up in September, depending on the school. So that's a lot of time where kids are not accessing curriculum.
Mm-hmm.
And then I'm also seeing this, it just depends on state and city and stuff like that, because I know in the South has a very big history of doing wrong by African Americans as far as the education system goes, criminal justice and all of that. For instance, I'm looking at a stat right now. It says, according to ACT stats, only 3% in Mississippi were, only 3% of Black Americans were college ready.
Wow.
So, I mean, there's just you just have to think about what's happening right now. As you said, a lot of our community just doesn't have the resources, laptops and stuff like that, which is what you absolutely need.
Right. And in terms of, I agree, I would 100% agree with you. I think what we need to do now moving forward as we transition to the next school year, and they're saying that this could potentially happen again where there's another breakout with this virus, we need to start working now to make sure that each family, each household has computers, they have resources, that they have everything that they need to be successful. And I feel like this is when I would love to see the whole country coming together for our kids, because they're going through this pandemic as well. And I know I just feel like we have to start preparing for this. We have a few months to get it right going into the fall. And let's say schools decide to do partial, like some day, like maybe like we do half days or 2 days a week we're in class. It just depends on what every school decides. But I do think that measures have to start being put in place to ensure that kids can access the content and resources and get the resources that they need to be able to at least achieve grade level like expectations.
I mean, I remember, oh, sorry. But I remember like one of the things that Andrew Yang, he said constantly was that 2/3% of like what happens in the classroom is a result of like what's happening at home. And I can, I guess, attest to that because like I have a mother who has worked in the education system ever since I was born, and like I would hear stories and all of that. She worked in predominantly African American schools because like her thing was to serve our community. And a lot of the stuff that she would like have to deal with would be like what was happening in the home. Like, I mean, there was, violence at home, and like when the kids get to school, they can't really put that aside. And also like you have to think about like the resources these schools get. Black schools get far less resources than than white schools or any other type of school. And what this does is like automatically just sets Black kids up to perform lower than white kids. I mean, because I know like I came from Houston Independent School District, and white schools white schools and like white communities, they would have like programs like SAT prep and classes like IB classes that I guess kind of serve as like AP classes. They're like more prestigious to like colleges and stuff like that. And then you go in Black classrooms and they, barely have like textbooks that actually look nice. They're like ripped up and all of that. And then like when you concentrate a bunch of like, people in poverty and like into one school building, it's basically saying that, I mean, you stay over here and we have these people over here. Because like how they do it is like, I mean, we have a magnet school in Houston Independent School District, but in order to get into like the certain prestigious schools, like you have to score a certain grade on like some tests. But when you consider like how the education system and the home life like fails our community the most from a young age, it's like, I mean, it's like it kind of makes it like impossible because I mean, and then they're basically stuck in their communities. I mean, they sure as hell can't afford private school. And so it's just it's a lot of systemic problems. And it's not just like, I mean, we can't afford laptops and all of that. Like the education system has failed us, failed Black people like from the moment like they come out of the womb. And basically like the government is saying you don't matter because they don't even give, adequate resources to these schools.
Rashad, what do you think? You haven't said anything. What's your position on this?
So can everybody hear me? All right.
Yep.
Okay. So I'm really just trying to take in the conversation now because I jumped in late, but you know what? From everything I've heard, it completely mirrors my own experience coming up in the PG County school system. Like I always felt that we didn't have the proper resources to do as best as we could. And there were a lot of issues within the school system itself that really stopped individuals from progressing as far as they could have. Like ridiculous things. I can tell you a story from when I was in 8th grade. I took algebra in 8th grade. And there were a bunch of mix-ups, blah, blah, blah. By the time I get to high school, I'm taking algebra again in the 9th grade. Now, I've already taken this once before, so I was completely disinterested, completely failed out of it. Ended up having to go to summer school for it. 6 weeks into summer school, the teacher's like, yo, you passed algebra in 8th grade. Why are you here? Like, just issues like that, where the school system itself was already a joke. It didn't help my my hunger for learning. So that's one of the things that I've seen, where the school systems that we go to when we grow up are just garbage.
You know,
Something.
I'm sorry. Go ahead, Heidi.
Now, I was just going to say, and I want to ask you about this, Erica. In Louisiana, which is where my family is, in the Lafayette parish, they had stopped grading, giving a homework grade, and they did it as an attempt to kind of, I guess, even the playing field a little bit, because Louisiana is a poor state, but there is like there are kids that are affluent, and then there are kids that are really poor, and there's kind of not much in the way of the middle. But what they were finding was like your affluent kids had tutors, they had parents that were like sitting over them, watching them do their homework, or they were doing their homework for them, even in some cases, right? So these kids, they'd have really strong homework grades. And then you had other kids who didn't have the resources and the opportunities, or they didn't have parents literally sitting there doing their kids' homework because parents were working or whatever, that while they might do well when they're in school, like their homework grades weren't, they suffered. And so they stopped like grading homework. And then you saw like the affluent kids' parents protesting. They were like upset that they couldn't like artificially boost their children, right, with all their tutors and their, lording over their children's homework, right? And so then their kids actually had to make up for it in school, like where you watch them take a test and make sure they're paying attention in class and learning. So I wanted to get your take on that, Erica, because it was so controversial. But to me, I mean, it made sense, because like, when I went to school, there were the kids that had all the resources and the tutors and that could, with homework being like half your grade, that's, that put them well ahead everyone else.
Well, there's no study that shows that if you do homework, you're going to, it's going to like help you become smarter or anything. There's no research out there that I've seen that validates that. I think that like people associate, I guess the way I say it is like, when you think of grades, it's a way to measure where you are, where you stand on something. Personally, in the last few years as a teacher, I've kind of changed the way that I give a test, who I assess, because when I think of proficiency, I think of it in like, can you apply this in a real world situation? Like, so I'll just use just a really recent example, right? So if I'm teaching my students the 6 simple machines in physics, 5th graders, simple machines, the 6 simple machines, they can regurgitate that, they can memorize them, they can see a picture and point out, but what I want them to be able to do is apply it to a real world scenario. So recently I had them make Rube Goldberg machines where they had to pick 4 of the 6 simple machines and do something that either A, makes their dog or their animal's life easier, or 2, helps the environment in some way. And the machines that they came up with are phenomenal. Like, they're absolutely amazing. If I can share them with you right now on the stream, like, I would absolutely do it. So I say all this to say is like, when we're testing kids, in my opinion, I feel like we should start giving them application tests. Like, can you apply this? So if we're doing ratios and proportions in math, let's go to a grocery store and like, let's figure out if you can do, like, if you can find the recipe and do it in terms of ratios. So like, let's say that if you have a box of cookies and you need to make it for 75 people. So can you multiply the ingredients to mirror that, to make sure we have enough ingredients to make 75 cookies, right? So like, I feel like we need to start going into something like that personally. I think grades are, for parents, it's kind of like that's what they know, right? So it's like kind of hard to change. I think change is hard for people. Otherwise, we'd have UBI. But going back to what Ashley was saying though about resources, it's like, but you can't even go to that type of testing without having resources, right? So now you're stuck to paper, pencil, Scantron.
And I also just want to point out, so I lived in Houston, Texas, which is like one of the most diverse cities in the country. And then my parents, I have two younger brothers. They moved to Missouri, the white suburbs in Missouri. And that's been like the first time that they've ever experienced like racism. Like, and my he's 9 years old. He's 9 years old, and he's in the fourth grade. And I mean, before they moved to Missouri, I know he had like a best friend in was it like second grade or something like that, and he was white. They like stuck together like all the time. And then I remember visiting them in Missouri this one time, and my brother, like, we were sitting at a burger place, and like right across the way, I guess sitting perpendicular to us, there was this like white family with her, and it was this mother with this group, like with her kids. And my brother kept looking at them, and I was like, go talk to them if you want to talk to them. And then he pointed at his wrist or at his hand, and like I automatically knew what that meant. Like, he thought that they wouldn't want to talk to him because he's Black. And that's something that didn't exist before they moved to Missouri. So I don't necessarily think the answer is as simple as we need to get Black people in white schools, because I mean, the thing is, like, are they going to be welcome there? And also, like, ignorant parents, they have sway over their kids' thought process and all that.
Racism is taught. Racism is for sure taught. We know that. I went to a predominantly white school, and my school actually had bussed in kids from low income areas. My parents purposely moved into a district so I can get a good education. So what Ashley's saying is there's a lot of truth to what she's saying, that there is kind of like, you can't just dump people into a school and think that that's like the solution. There's a whole education piece and acceptance and tolerance that needs to play a factor, because I was often left out. And I like, to this day, like, it hurts to think about, like, I was like the only Black cheerleader on my cheerleading squad, and I felt left out a lot of the times. We're good now, like, I'm cool with the girls now, but at the time, like, if they knew how much they hurt me, maybe they would make different choices. And I can't just say that they're racist or anything like that, but it's, because I would never say that. I don't think that. But, it is really, really hard to be the only Black kid in a class, to be the token Black person, the one that's expected to speak on behalf of all Black people. And you can't really do that because we all have very different experiences.
Right. And I was going to add on to that too, because my daughter, probably before this whole coronavirus thing blew up, she actually experienced that at her school, and she's in the third grade, mind you. Okay, so just to kind of give reference, the town that I live in is Three Rivers, Michigan. It's a little small country town. I know a lot of people in Michigan, they've heard about it. I know a lot of people in Indiana, they heard about it. So in the school that she goes to, of course, is predominantly white, and then there's like a sprinkle of Black kids in there. During recess, my daughter goes out, and one of her friends that she normally plays with, they all get into a group together. They go run off, and she tries to join in. The girl told her specifically, no, this group is specifically for white girls and mixed girls. You're not allowed to play with us. That crushed her heart, and she ran to the teacher and literally cried, bawled her eyes out, due to the fact that she didn't understand how come she couldn't play with her friend, regardless of the skin color. And again, like you guys are saying, like, racism, yes, it is definitely a learned behavior and a taught behavior, and it needs to stop. it needs to stop, because now you're tapping into something that these kids don't even really realize what they're doing. Like, they're hurting their friends from playing with them, and that's all they want to do is to play. And I think that if we ever have to do another um, cast, we should have to talk about that and address that, due to the fact that it's time out for playing games. It's time out for sweeping things underneath the rug. No, we're going to call a spade, no matter what the color is. It's still a spade. We have to address it. In order for things to work and communities to come together as one and actually fight for everybody's rights, we got to address that head on. We have to. And if we don't, again, as history has shown us, it's going to repeat over and over and over again.
I read facts a while ago, and it's something I never really thought of. But Black kids are they're much more likely to be put in special education classes, because if like they don't score, or if they don't, if like a teacher suspects that they don't have an adequate reading, a literacy rate, then that there's like something wrong with them, or some teachers just like push them away and like lose hope with them and all of that. They don't really consider like what underlies beneath that. And so I read that, and also like Black kids are much more likely to be sent to alternative school. I mean, especially if they go to predominantly white schools. And like touching on the special education classes again, I can't remember if they wanted to do that to my brother, but no, I've heard a lot of cases where Black teachers have wanted to put Black kids in special education classes, and they succeed a lot of times, like the teachers do, in like putting them in special ed classes. And what that does is basically slows their literacy rate even more, because there's a different type of rigor in regular typical classes and atypical classes. And yeah, like I know like my brother went to school, and like I know the teacher always would complain about him, not for his literacy rate, but because like he was like super active. And like the teacher, she would complain and say like, is there something wrong with him? Because he didn't comply like with other like white kids in the classroom. But he was just simply being a kid. He was different. And
kids are just active.
Yeah.
Kids are just active. That's just facts.
Yeah, and there's just like, I feel like there's a different type of requirement placed on Black kids. I mean, I think, yeah, if kids are kids, then why is it true that like more Black kids end up in alternative schools? Like, why are younger kids more likely to be treated as adults in the legal system?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. To go to the legal system, that's the prisons, and I actually brought this up earlier, and we cannot have this conversation without touching on this, is that COVID has had a profound impact on people that are incarcerated. And a lot of people that have nonviolent offenses, were impacted by the coronavirus. They were not getting hand sanitizers, they weren't getting masks. The prisons and jails did not respond to this well, and it is really, really disheartening.
Oh yeah, agreed, and it shows too that I know a lot of people may talk about it, but it just shows how it was actually handled in the first place. That it wasn't taken seriously. That a lot of people thought it was a joke. Until again it hits your backyard. Now you can't call it a joke no more. You gotta answer it and deal with it. And if you don't deal with it, you're literally going to suffer the repercussions of it. Yes, we've had cases of people. Yes, they've died. Yes, we have people that have recovered from it. And all of that, it just goes to show that had the necessary steps were put into place beforehand, a lot of this could have been avoided. And especially in the African American communities, a lot of them could have been avoided But because everybody was all, I don't know what the word was, lackadaisical. I said that right about it. They was like, yeah, whatever. But now you can't do that anymore.
Yeah. And there's one thing I want to add, especially while we're talking about the prison system and how hard they've been impacted by it. You've got states that are using prison labor to produce hand sanitizer and masks, and the prisoners are not even allowed access to the products they're making. They can't have that protective product despite the fact that they're making it, and it's the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard of.
Yep. In Louisiana, what was it? I think it was sanitation workers were striking. They went on strike, so they just fired them all and put prison labor as sanitation workers. They were striking because they weren't given the proper equipment to do their job. I mean, they're handling trash. Come on. They weren't given the proper equipment to do their jobs. And so they're like, screw you guys. We're just going to have prisoners, So.
That's crazy. I mean, I really think that racism is something that is one of the many things that we need to actively purge from our society. It's not something that's just going away by itself. Like, it's been around way too long. And a lot of the other things we're working towards, reducing inequality, getting people a foundation. I mean, everything you guys talked about with education, like I see all over the place, and racism is one of those things that we have to have these conversations about and put in those one of those things that we need to actively push out of our society, because there's no space for it. There's nothing productive, and honestly, at this point, it's people holding on to things of I don't know. There's no excuse for it. Like, honestly, and I definitely appreciate everybody here having these conversations, because they have to be had more. There's no reasons for these things to be happening in our society, especially at the levels where we look at. I mean, if you look at everything we've talked about, if you look at the education, if you look at the prison system, if you look at jobs in our society and how certain demographics, it's just, hey, there's a pandemic and certain demographics are going to get hit harder than others, and there's not anything really put in place to prevent this from happening. And it's really, really, it's not just frustrating, it's at the point where it's infuriating. So what are some things that we can do and our listeners can do, today, to make sure that we're moving in the right direction in terms of these things?
I think, go ahead, Rashad, go ahead.
So there's one thing I wanted to touch on before I got to that, and it's really kind of the main reason I jumped on the stream, so I've been late. But when it comes to states that are starting to reopen, Governor Hogan just announced that starting tomorrow at 5 p.m., he's lifting the stay-at-home order for Maryland. But my county, Prince George's County, one of the most densely populated areas in Maryland, with one of the highest Black communities, our county executive was like, absolutely not. This county is not ready to open back up. We just had our deadliest weekend in coronavirus last weekend. So while the rest of the state is starting to open up, Prince George's County, Montgomery County still starting to spike. And really, it's pretty clear why. Densely populated area, metropolitan, there are a lot of African American communities around here. Our hospitals cannot handle the amount of patients that are being put in them. So when it comes to things that we can really do, one, we have to take a look at the areas that are being hit the hardest, and we have to make sure we can funnel extra resources there. And for the people who are living in those areas, you absolutely have to do your part. You have to continue to stay at home. And if you want people to stay at home and stay safe, we need to find a way to make sure that they can get the resources that they need to do so. Make sure that they don't have to worry about where their next meal comes from. Make sure that you don't have people worrying about how their rent's going to get paid, despite the fact that we have a boosted unemployment system. The unemployment system is completely broken. My mother is a small business owner. She owns a daycare. Her entire association, none of the daycare owners in her association have gotten a single unemployment check throughout this entire pandemic. The system is completely broken. One, a lot of them couldn't even verify their income. So the state was only offering them $100 a week. $100 a week that they have not even gotten yet. And there's no guarantee that they'll even get it before the orders are completely lifted. You have a lot of banks, mortgage companies. And again, I'll default to my parents because this is a situation I know where the bank told them, hey, you know what? Well, we understand you're going through a struggle, but you're still going to have to pay us. You're still going to have to accrue interest. You're still going to have to pay $500 a month, and we'll hold off the rest of it until later. And it's like, how do you expect that from people who don't have any income? The unemployment system isn't working, and it just doesn't make any sense. And I see personally from the groups that I'm around that not only is this struggle going to hit African American communities financially, it's going to hurt them mentally as well. You, a lot of people don't really understand the absolute terror that's involved in wondering if you're going to be thrown out of your house and onto the street. That's being homeless has always been a terror for me. I've never even experienced it before. So what can we do? We have to get the resources where they need to be. And the people who are in those areas have to be smart and have to do their best to stay safe, not only for themselves, but for their neighbors, for their brothers, their sisters, their families, everybody involved in the community.
And I think another solution is to continue to put pressure on our elected officials to put in these bills things that are going to help people, and that people are taking precedent, or taking that they're the priority. Like, to go back to the $2,000 a month reoccurring payments now and after this pandemic would be really, really helpful, because as we go into the summer, there's a lot of opportunities for parents to at least, if they could do this, I don't know, because obviously we spoke about not having resources, but trying to find ways to remediate their kid and to be able to help them, be able to purchase the computer that they need going into the next school year if their school's unable to provide it. I think a lot of people have drained their savings accounts, and all those kind of things. So I think putting pressure on our elected officials, us continuing to call our elected officials, saying, advocating for universal basic income is going to be a step in the right direction. And I think if enough people call and make this a big deal, it can get passed. And I think I echo what Rashad said by staying safe, and obviously, just doing the basic things that everyone can control, and staying informed. I think as long as we're staying informed, having conversations, we're able to start to move in the right direction. Obviously, we have a lot of work that we need to do, but those are some of my ideas of how we can solve how COVID's impacting the Black community.
Yeah, and to, I guess, piggyback off of what Eller said, I think you said, like, you don't know, like, why racism exists. I remember this James Baldwin quote. I think it's from his book, The Fire That Started. And he's like, I imagine that the reason people hang on to their hate so much is that when their hate is gone, oh, wow, how does it go? When their hate is gone, they'll be stuck with the pain of, they'll be stuck with the pain. And so, I mean, I think that really applies to, like, racism. I mean, and, all of this, because, I mean, if we're to get past racism and all of that, that would require white people realizing that, I mean, there's been systemic oppression towards African Americans, and nothing has been done on their part to I guess, stop that oppression. And so, I mean, that takes a lot of mental strength. And I hope that we'll be able to get to that point. It'll take a lot of work.
Sorry, I was going to say, I think it's important to make this clear. Not all white people are bad. I think that's really important to just note that there are so many people out there that are not racist, that do support communities of color, that care about it, they are informed, that there are. Like, I think it's important to, I don't want us to ever come off like we're generalizing when we're definitely not doing that.
Yeah, no, I've definitely had, like, a lot of white friends. I've had.
I need to make sure. I think it's really important to say that there are so many people. Like, there was, like, when Aubrey died, there were a lot of people that ran that were not Black on his behalf because they knew it was an injustice. They knew it was horrific. And they spoke up. And there was actually a guy, I think Ronald actually sent this, I don't know, or Ash, one of you guys did, where there was a guy actually running in the neighborhood with a TV, like, nothing's happening to me, like, what's going on? So that was a way of using his voice to say, like, there's something seriously wrong here if I'm running down a street holding a TV and nothing's happening to me. So I just think we want to be very clear that we acknowledge that it's just a handful of, there's a disparity, and there are some people that we would really love for them to see walk in someone else's shoes.
Yeah, I mean, there's discrimination from all races and all groups. I mean, not just races, but I mean, there's even discrimination against like the Jewish community and all these other religions and all that. But yeah, that was actually just like a general quote.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that.
Yeah, I just think that, I mean, Black people in this country just, racism never ended. Slavery, I mean,
happened.
Yeah, and it's still having an effect on our community. And I mean, if you think of the prison system, that's slavery in itself. I mean, free labor and all of that. So, I mean, that's why, for anyone wondering, that's why we're talking about Black issues. Like, there's just a lot of stuff that has never really been addressed in this country. And every time, like, we've tried to, like, make movements and all that, I mean, we've been kind of, like, held back and pushed aside and say, like, all lives matter, or everybody's free. And it's like, I recognize that. And you're completely true. And yeah, of course, like, not all white people are bad. I mean, there were many white people.
You shouldn't even have to say that. Like, like, why do you even have to, like, preface that? Like, if, for instance, me being an advocate for women victims of sexual assault, I'm not going to sit here and be like, but, it's not all men. There's some men. I'm not even they know you're not talking about them. So I hate that you have to sit here and say, but it's not all white people. You don't even have to say that. You can be mad about shit, right? You are entitled to be mad about shit and not have to sit here and clarify for someone's feelings. Like, you're not talking about all of them, right?
Yeah.
Well, thank you, James and Ellers, for bringing us on again to talk about these really important issues. I think
Heidi,
these conversations are really, really important.
Yes.
I'm glad you guys are doing this. I enjoy being here, and I'm not going to be on all of them, but I really look forward to you guys' future.
Thank you.
Yeah, and I appreciate both of you guys as well. Like, I really like these conversations, and I think they're pretty productive. And I think we should continue having these conversations.
Yeah. Look forward to it.
Not just us, but people in general. Like, we need to have these hard conversations.
Well, thank you so much, you guys. This has been awesome.
Thank you, guys. And thanks, Rashad, for joining us, too, because Jeannie didn't want to show his face again.
Don't do that to that man. Don't do that to him.
We love you, Jeannie.
Yes, Jeannie, we love you. Well, thanks everybody for being here. We'll continue to do this as long as people continue to want to have this conversation. If you want to do it, continue to do it weekly. Cool. If you want to do it more than one time a week, then we'll do whatever y'all want. So, any closing words from anybody else?
Erica, do you want to talk about the YouTube channel that we plan on?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
On the spot, Erica. There you go.
You don't?
Ashley, you volunteered it.
That's a little teaser. We'll leave out there a teaser for MCOY.
MCOY, we're starting a YouTube channel.
Awesome.
We'll basically be having these conversations like this more often, and we look forward to, I guess, including you guys or including everyone in these types of discussions because they don't really get talked about. And it's great to hear it from our perspective. So be on the lookout for that. Yeah.
Exciting.
Awesome. Anything you guys need from us, just let us know.
Just let us know. Yep.
More than happy. We'll promote anything and everything you guys want to do. Alrighty.
Thanks, Ellers. Bye, everyone.
Bye. Love
Bye,
you
guys.
guys.
See ya.
Bye. I love you.
Bye.
Bye.